climate change activists are staging protests in central London today as part of what they're calling a rebellion day. Environmental activists are blocking bridges in the city.
12 years to radically transform our economy and our society to stop this crisis and protect human civilization as we know it. We'll talk about it like that because that's what it is.
You're listening to Raw's Fighting for Life series, and we're lucky to be joined now by Marcela Mulholland, a member of the Sunrise Movement, a group taking US politics by storm in recent months, building an army of young people to make climate change a priority across America. At first, just asking politicians to refuse fossil fuel money, they're now leading the fight for a Green New Deal through a variety of actions, including occupying the office of now Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and are supported by a number of Democratic politicians, including most notably the newly elected Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Marcela, how are you?
I'm doing well, Adam. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining us. I know the Sunrise Movement has grown so fast over the past few months. And obviously, we've seen similar movements such as the Extinction Rebellion movement we've already talked to in the UK. I was wondering if you could tell me what you feel is unique about the Sunrise Movement compared to other climate movements around the world.
Yeah, so something that I think Sunrise really gets at uniquely compared to other environmental organizations is that we directly speak to the false choice that politicians have presented to us of having to choose between the economy or the environment. And Sunrise is really explicitly making the case that our generation has the right to grow up on a livable planet and also to have good jobs. And so often this tactic of saying we either have to choose between jobs or clean air or clean water has been presented to us by politicians that want to divide the electorate and make sure that we don't advance on either economic justice or environmental justice. And Sunrise is really just saying that a policy like the Green New Deal has the potential to transform our economy and uplift millions of Americans out of poverty while also addressing the climate crisis.
It's really good. I was just wondering about your own personal story and how you first got involved with Sunrise. And I know it's quite a good story.
Yeah, it's a kind of a funny story. So I don't know if you've heard, but in the US, we recently elected, or it's been like 2 years, but we elected someone named Donald Trump, and it was a very dramatic event for US politics. And it happened while I was in my second year of college, and I was just developing my environmental awareness and learning about all of these environmental issues, including climate change and species extinction. And then Donald Trump was elected, and that was really catastrophic for a variety of issues, including climate change. So it was this really pivotal moment for me personally, where I felt like the issues I was learning to care about in my own life were really taking a turn for the worse on the national scale. So in the days following his election, I felt really radicalized and righteous, I guess, and I wore a sign to school that said climate change is real, because I couldn't believe that we weren't talking about that in every single conversation ever. And as it turns out, the teacher for the class that I first walked into wearing this sign was herself a seasoned environmental activist, and her and I connected over my sign and other things after that, and she put me in touch with Sunrise Movement, and I applied to a program that Sunrise launched last summer called the Sunrise Semester, which essentially was I think 6-month-long program that placed young people across the country in 5 politically critical states and gave young people the opportunity to volunteer full-time and go all in and helping to elect climate champions during the midterm elections that we just had.
Was there ever a moment when you've been with Sunrise where you thought movement? Was there ever that one moment?
So we, as you mentioned, we recently did a sit-in in Speaker Pelosi's office, and there was this one. Okay, these were like 2 moments, but they happened in the same. So we had myself and 52 other young people, I think, were arrested, and we had been escorted out of her office by the authorities, and we were standing outside kind of being processed and everything, and I saw this guy walking. I'm not going to say the name of the organization that he was representing, but he was this older dude in like a suit, and he was wearing the pin of like this climate organization in the US that focuses on like bipartisan free market solutions to climate change. And it's like an older, whiter crowd of people who have been working on climate for decades and haven't really been able to make as much of an impact as I feel like we did in just that one sit-in. But he was just looking at us, and he was walking down the street of DC, and he looked really frustrated, and I'm sure his job is frustrating, and he just like looked at me and saw us. We were all wearing signs that said 12 years period, like talking about the recent UN IPCC report, and he just like gave me a thumbs up and was like gave this exasperated sigh of like he was relieved that other people were doing something. And to me it just spoke to like the new generation of leadership that's rising in the climate movement, and it's so much more. It's just so hopeful, and the energy is so refreshing and vibrant, and I think that we're really changing the tides on this issue in the United States.
Okay. Did you say there was a second moment there, or was that for 2
The
minutes?
second moment was just within the same like 20 minutes we were standing out there being processed, and I looked like into Nancy Pelosi's office where we had just been inside, and there was like a staffer standing there looking out at us, and he gave me a thumbs up. So I was like, potential ally on the inside, I don't know.
Lovely. Obviously, you've switched recently to campaigning for the Green New Deal. I was just wondering if you could talk us through some of the main principles to those who might not be aware of it over here in the UK or indeed anywhere else.
Yeah, so the main thing that Sunrise was pushing for in the past few months was something that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the recently elected congresswoman from New York, proposed, and she proposed a House Select Committee on a Green New Deal. And some of the main principles behind this select committee, which ended up getting the support of 45 Congress people and hundreds of organizations and thousands of people across the country, but Nancy Pelosi unfortunately chose to move forward with a different select committee on climate change, which was less exciting, and we can touch on that in a moment. But what we were pushing for was a committee that had a clear mandate to establish and plan for a Green New Deal, which would be an economic transformation and a massive social mobilization of the United States to address climate change within the time frame established by the United Nations in their recent IPCC report, which says that we have to dramatically slash our carbon emissions by the year 2030. So the Green New Deal would be a massive piece of legislation that would transform many parts of American life. And some of the main focal points that we were pushing for were that, one, the politicians in charge of developing this legislation be politicians who've taken the no fossil fuel money pledge, because we believe that the companies responsible for creating this crisis and who are currently profiting off of it should not have a seat at the table in deciding what legislation we present to deal with this issue. And secondly, like I said, it meets the time frame established by the United Nations. And unfortunately, Nancy Pelosi moved forward with something that she called the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. But what it really makes clear is that talking about climate change as a crisis and actually treating it like one are two very different things, because the committee that Nancy Pelosi created does not have a mandate to create a plan for a Green New Deal. It does not even have subpoena power, which is pretty important for committees in order for them to see experts and really develop legislation on issues. And lastly, and importantly, it allows members to sit on the committee who take campaign contributions from the fossil fuel industry. So we're a little underwhelmed about that, but the movement continues, and we're still able to build a lot of people and political power around a Green New Deal and completely shift the debate on what actual climate policy looks like in 2019.
You mentioned early on that it was about the trade-off between the economy and the climate and how that just wasn't a thing. Mm-hmm. So is there a strong plan for the economy for protecting jobs as part of the Green New Deal?
Yeah, not only protecting jobs, but really understanding that any addressing climate change is going to create millions of jobs if we really want to do it within the time frame that we need to. So Sunrise really understands that not only is there the potential to create a society that is carbon neutral and that is environmentally sustainable, but also to put millions of people to work while doing so, is really an invaluable opportunity to address climate change and unprecedented levels of economic inequality that we're also dealing with here in the United States.
Brilliant. I want to go back to talk about Sunrise itself again. It's often seemed that Sunrise has its own set plan. Its plan is to support the Green New Deal, to give us this plan to move forward with climate action, whereas a variety of other groups only have this plan to take action now or to raise awareness of the issue. Do you feel like the approach Sunrise has taken should be replicated by more people around the world or not?
I totally think so. As someone who has worked with various environmental groups in the country, I think Sunrise's strategy is the most hopeful one because we are focused on building people power and political power. And what that means is that we are not afraid to be partisan and political when we see really critical elections taking place. And we will organize electorally by the thousands when we need to, which is every election nowadays. And we also are being intentional about building the people power and educating the public on things like a Green New Deal and climate change. And it's really that combination that I think is setting us up for success because there is no time to really just only be educating the public on this issue. We need to win elections and we need to get policy change now. And Sunrise is working to achieve both of those goals, not is one or the other, but really seeing both of them as critical to our movement's success as a whole.
Sunrise tends to talk a lot about domestic policy in the US. I was just wondering if you've had anything to say about international climate negotiations like the COP meetings, the Paris Agreement. Do you think they've failed us in any way?
I definitely think the international climate negotiations have largely failed us for a while now. For one, it was like before Paris, it took a long time for the global international community to really agree on this issue or like even pretend to take action on it. And then the Paris Climate Agreement was this really big deal, but it wasn't even like fully binding, and it sets us on track for 2 degrees more of warming, which would still be catastrophic, even if we meet those goals. So I think Sunrise is focusing on domestic policy because we know that the United States has so much global geopolitical power. And I think as young people here, we feel a large sense of solidarity with young people in other parts of the world whose countries and livelihoods are going to be affected by climate change. And it's really our country that's largely responsible for a lot of the emissions that are creating this problem. And also we know that if the United States starts to take this issue seriously, it will signal to the rest of the world that this is like how the future is going to look. And that's why we feel so strongly about using our positions as citizens of the United States, of young people in this country, to push for this issue.
Yeah, you talked about the geopolitical power of the US. Do you think that if you manage to get the Green New Deal legislated, do you think that would lead to similar schemes around the world or not?
We hope so. I think that it would lead other countries that are also the biggest polluters alongside the US to also take this issue seriously, and hopefully it would set an example for other countries to do the same.
And finally, just to end talking about Sunrise, what are your next steps in trying to enact the Green New Deal, and are there any potential issues you might be able to foresee?
So Sunrise has big plans for the next few years. In the coming months, we are going to be going on a 15-city Green New Deal tour across the United States and taking the idea of a Green New Deal outside of the DC Beltway and into everyday life for Americans. And we're going to be talking about this policy to people from all walks of life in this country. And that is happening within the next few months. And then secondly, we're going to be organizing on a massive scale to we just released a really hype video. I can send you the link for you to show people, but we're going to organize the biggest popular demonstration at a presidential debate in history. And our priority is to get all Democratic candidates for, like in the Democratic primary for president, to get all of them to sign the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge and also come out in support of a Green New Deal. We're going to push for a race to the top on climate policy and really push them to try to outdo each other on who can be better on climate. And then once we have the Democratic candidate that we want, hopefully we'll then be organizing around the general election for president.
Right. So just to make that clear, it's the first Democratic primary you're going to, yep?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, brilliant.
We first have to deal with the primaries and then we'll deal with the other stuff.
I just wanted to ask a very general question. We're asking like a few similar questions to everyone we talk to. Is politics in general a barrier to climate action, or is it actually the solution?
I think it's both. It's a little, you're getting existential on me, Adam. I think when we have a politics and a democracy that is healthy and actually represents the interests of the general public, of your average citizen, then politics can be a great medium for justice and for addressing issues that are massive in scale, like climate change. But I think, unfortunately, when you have a politics that is so corrupted and represents the interests of the top 1%, that represents the interests of fossil fuel CEOs and executives, and not the worker at a fossil fuel company, or the child whose air is being polluted or drinking water is being polluted by oil and gas companies, then you get a politics that is standing in the way of justice and inhibiting us from addressing issues like climate change. So I think it's really, it can go either way, and it's largely up to people to organize and demand the kind of government that we deserve.
One more thing. We asked the person from Extinction Rebellion this, and he couldn't really come up with an answer.
Oh my God, I'm nervous.
What do you think is just one small sign of hope you have for progress this year?
Oh my God, I can answer that. We had
absolutely anything.
We had record-breaking youth voter turnout in the midterm elections in the United States. And if young people took their civic duty seriously and voted at comparable rates of the older generations of voting blocks, we could literally get any policy that we wanted because there are so many of us, but the problem in the past has been that young people haven't voted, but we saw a change in that tide in the midterms, and I hope that that continues on into 2020. And also, just like I have so much hope from the young people at Sunrise who are caring about this issue and saying no to despair and taking action.
No to despair and taking action. That actually sounds pretty good. If people wanted to find out more about Sunrise, how could they find it? How could they get in touch with you?
You can go to sunrisemovement.org, spelled how you think it's spelled. And you can also, through the website, you can find our other social media links and connect with us and follow our work there. And
apart from obviously going to the Democratic primaries, have you got any big events coming up that people might be able to engage with?
The Green New Deal tour is the most upcoming one, and people can find more information about that on our social media pages and our website. And hopefully we're coming to a city near you. But if you're in the UK,
maybe not.
But you will be able to follow along our tour on social media, and we're going to have some exciting movement leaders and leaders from the Democratic Party joining us on this tour. And so you should keep your eyes peeled.
Brilliant. Marcela, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Adam. It was a pleasure.